If you have the will and a moment to spare.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Beautiful Minds. Today we are in conversation with Mr. Ravi Chatterjee. I'm your host, Rupinder Malia. And to give you a little insight into Mr. Ravi's work, he is the founder of ARIF, creating sustainable learning culture for future leaders. He has got 20 years of experience into the field of leadership development and executive education. So here is Mr. Ravi Chatterjee, and I would like him to give us a little insight into his work and his company. Over to you, sir.
Hey, thank you, Rupinder. Thank you for having me on your show. Um, it's a real pleasure. So, yeah, I mean, it's been a couple of decades now that I have been into this field of learning and development. And it's been a pleasure working with people from various organizations, having probably come in touch with more than um, a few thousand, if I may put it that way, right? Helping them at different stages of their career, right from being campus graduates to being leaders of organizations, CXOs and CXO minus one. So my work is typically in the area of what I call as adaptive skills. Um, and what I mean by adaptive skills is a range of capabilities which require a shift in the mindset or in the thinking of the individual to become better. Because if you typically look at it in the last decade or so, what has happened is there has been a huge democratization of knowledge. Everybody knows what he or she needs to know.
Yes.
Where there is a little bit of a difficulty is in doing it. And probably the greater difficulty is in making it a part of their regular being or making it a part of their character. So now, if you have to do that, probably you have to come with a different mindset or a learner mindset or what Carol Dweck calls as growth mindset. And so, how do we kind of inculcate that into people? How do we transfer knowledge into practice? So, that's been my thrust area.
Great, great. So this name of the company, Arib,
Mhm.
that actually grabbed my attention. So I want you to like explain to us that how did you come up with this terminology or this name? How did it come to your mind?
Honestly, let me be, they say that behind, it almost sounds a little um, old school chivalrous to say that behind every successful man there is a woman. I would say behind every successful person there's another person, and
Yes.
behind the story of Arif is my better half, or my wife. She kind of We were kind of brainstorming on this word, and she kind of found a word which would be very close to our Indian culture and ethos. Now, incidentally, this happens to be one of those few words which means the same in in Sanskrit as well as in Tamil, the two ancient languages of India, and it means quest for a higher form of knowledge. And in a way, it kind of there is a anagram of my name inside that as well that you must have
Okay.
perceived, right? So, so it kind of fitted the bill very well, and it also talks about our next generation. So that's what we are.
All right. Interesting. So, leadership development or executive education, this is the field where you are working.
Mhm.
So, just take me through it like during pandemic, what were the platforms being used by you or what kind of training scenario otherwise you go for? Is it about the training into the field of education or corporate, all these things? If you can explain a little.
Yeah. So what happened is um, there were two kinds of challenges that pandemic brought us. The first challenge was easier to surmount, which was the challenge of the medium. Uh, which medium do we use? And honestly, that was not too much of a challenge. Zoom was already there in the market. And thanks to my own background, I mean, I have worked for Dell Technologies for almost 8 years before I moved into my own entrepreneurial journey. So we had been using Microsoft Teams or Microsoft Skype for business and tools like that. I mean, from the times it was called Link, if you remember the old days,
Okay.
right? So we had been teaching on conference calls, we had been making presentations. So that was not really, the medium was not really a challenge.
Okay.
What was a challenge is the message. The message needed to change because, honestly, what the templates were of engaging with people. So, for example, what employee engagement meant, what leadership support meant, what resonant leadership meant, um, before the pandemic, when people were working co-located in an office space, changed dramatically with pandemic. And that is where we had to kind of overhaul a lot of what we were teaching before as home truths, and we had to kind of adapt and adopt and kind of reinvent ourselves as we went along. And they became they became the hallmark. Now, for example, from a learning strategy standpoint, Rupinder, if you see, we could do a lot of work in a classroom where we could help people chart out things and a lot of that kind of work, or a lot of experiential activities. Now, we couldn't do any more a tower building, if you may like. I mean, or a game strategy,
Yeah.
or any one of those outbound activities. I mean, it was not possible. But what was possible, and what it kind of allowed us to bring in through very nuanced facilitative strategies, where things like, how do we help people tell their stories? How could we connect in an empathetic manner to their pain and and what they were going through? So once we kind of moved into those areas, we were able to make a significant impact, is what I would say.
So I was, reading one of your interviews with Insights,
Yeah, 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 yeah,
CEO Insights, I
yeah,
think.
yeah,
So
yeah.
there you were talking about leadership, this whole structure,
Hmm.
and what grabbed my attention was
Hmm.
there are three key elements to leadership:
Hmm.
leading self, leading
Hmm.
others, leading change.
Hmm.
So, in a normal situation, we are all aware of leading others. But these elements, like leading self and leading change, it's very interesting. I really want you to just elaborate these points a
Yeah.
little.
I think it's very simple. When we say that we are going to lead others, we are going to lead teams, we are going to lead individuals. Traditionally, if you look at the entire gamut of 20th century leadership uh, literature, I'm not trying to essentialize, but if you were to look at it, it has always been leading from the front, right? The
Yes.
leader sets the direction, creates a vision, aligns his people, drives execution through processes, through command and control structures, through monitoring, through giving feedback, stuff like that. Now, what has changed of late is that you have very intelligent people coming and working for you, right? And in many ways, they are not looking for very microscule messages coming to them, or minuscule messages coming to them. They understand how they are supposed to do. I mean, and the primary job of organizations which are thriving and growing is to innovate, is to do things differently than way things were done before, which means people need a lot of freedom to think. People need a lot of free canvas to paint upon. So the job of the leader is no more leading from the front. There are no particular templates that they can give for, okay, you need to innovate this way. You do ABC 1 2 3 and you will reach an innovative solution. I mean, if you look at major practices that have changed, one of the key things that has come is agile now, and agile methodology, and it has kind of permeated from IT to other fields of business as well. What does agile mean? You create something which is called a minimum viable product, you take it to the client or the customer works with it, comes back and tells you, hey, This is what my end customer is telling me. Can you please add one more radio button, or change the user interface, or do something more with it, right? And things, products, services get continuously evolved over a period of time, which means the people who are creating it should be able to break what they have done every day. The biggest problem with leaders is they fall in love with what they are doing. They are so attached that detachment becomes a little difficult. When you sculpt something and you create, it's like a baby. You're nurturing, and you're letting that baby grow. You become very emotionally attached. Of course you are. But then tomorrow the client comes and say, what you did, we need more, we need less, we need this to change, so that there's no final product, there is no grand narrative anymore,
Yes.
right? So if you have to do that, you have to do two things. First of all, you need to know what are your own emotional drivers. What makes you happy, what makes you sad? Can you really take these feedback that is coming from everywhere in your stride, and still get back to office and create something new? Prove yourself every day, which means leading self, being self aware, having insights about yourself, knowing your own emotional triggers, knowing your own conversational triggers. That's the first part. The other part is you're constantly leading change. You have to be ahead of the curve. You have to anticipate what the client is going to ask tomorrow, or you have to create things which are in a design space. So if you look at, um, if you ask what are the four big companies that have emerged in the 21st century, a Facebook, look at it, or a Twitter. Did you and I ask anybody to create a Twitter for us? Did anybody give order for a Facebook?
No.
So it is the ability of the individuals to see what is happening around me, and the extension of the self, right? And then see how you can be a change agent and create products and create platforms on which people will come, grow, and thrive, right? So the new businesses are going to be businesses where there is no stasis, there is an evolving role all the time, right? So for that, agility, agility of emotions, agility of conversation, agility of social etiquette becomes a key play. And therefore, those two areas of leadership are much more important than any time else.
It's very interesting that usually people come up with all these trainings for the staff, right? In big companies or
Right,
anywhere around. But
right.
for having some programs for the leaders,
Mm,
because they say it's very usually it's used that it's very lonely out there on the
mm,
top.
mhm.
So leaders, they also seek some guidance, and it's a
Yes.
wonderful program, I would say, that where they also need to know this thing, leading themselves and leading that change.
Mm.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we try to do through our programs is to uninhibit, if I may coin a word like that,
Yes.
for leaders, because you know they are immensely successful people. Otherwise, they wouldn't be at the top of a company. It is their success which takes them there. It is their success which also brings them down.
Done.
It creates complacency. It creates what Marshall Goldsmith would say, the delusion of success. So they should always remember that famous title, what got you here won't get you there. Now, what does that mean? It means that they're able to look into themselves and see, how can I reinvent myself? How can I bring in practices which are needed to catapult my organization to the next orbit? That requires significant amount of self-awareness. That requires significant amount of courage to question what you have created as greatness. Because you see, once you have created as greatness, that's what you have gone to the market with. That's what you have gone to the shareholders with. And now, when
Yes.
you want to say that, hey, I want to do something new, you need to convince the shareholder that your story will work. Right. And that is where, if you see, even traditional companies, like for example, like Tatas and etc., are kind of getting into the. Uh, they have been slow starters, but then they have the, the might of the capital. So there you have a Tata going and buying a big basket, or a 1 mg, and you have, and therefore you might ask, what is it that a innovator does? Innovators also need to know when to exit at the right
Hmm.
and look for
That
something
makes sense. Yes,
right.
yes. That absolutely makes sense. That when to exit.
When to
I
exit. Yeah, yeah.
usually we know when to enter,
When
and we
you
forget about the exit too.
Yeah, because
So
you see, I mean,
how?
you
Yeah.
can only grow so much with your own
Hmm.
withal, right? I mean, imagine what when you give this off to Tata. Of course, it's like almost giving your child away to somebody. But then you
Hmm.
need to send your. It's like sending your child to away for education. It's something like that.
Hmm.
So that
Hmm.
is when your idea will grow big.
Hmm.
And if people were to talk about Flipkart, they would always have to talk about the Bansals. They would always have to talk about the owners of Big Basket and stuff like that. So people
Hmm.
cannot forget that. But then to grow at scale, they need
Hmm.
the heft and might of a multinational to go ahead. So that's how organizations seem to be growing and thriving.
Mhm. So traditionally, the scenario which people have in mind is the like tough meetings,
Mm, mm,
tough interactions
mm,
with the
mm,
staff or with the
mm,
people around them, the
mm,
leaders usually,
mm,
and then like you were talking about that emotional stability also,
mm, mm.
right? That if we call it emotional quotient also, that
Right, right,
stable emotional
right,
quotient.
right.
How important is that for leaders?
See, there are, I mean, if you typically look at it, the ability to understand how you are messaging and how effectively is the message being received is as important as what you are trying to say. Now, for example, if the data is that a particular person is short of what he was supposed to do by, say, a certain percentage points, he was supposed to sell for, say, you know 10 lakhs, and he's able to sell only 5.5 lakhs. um, the traditional way would be to just let the facts be known. Now, it is important in the current times to understand what is the person going to do with those facts. Are you helping the person through your conversation to do more the next time? Therefore, how you message it is very important. In this context, newer researches in the field of what we call as neuropsychology come into picture. So, for example, Rupinder, if you and I have a conversation for half an hour, and in that half an hour, 28 minutes, I keep on talking about all the good things that we did, and just for two times, somewhere in the 15th minute and somewhere in the 24th minute, I said, however, Rupinder, you could have done this, but Rupinder, you could have done that. 5 days down the line, you will only remember probably the however and the but,
Yes.
right? So, what happens is, in every conversation, how do we package this developmental feedback in a way that the person is able to take this as a learning opportunity and grow, not as a threat, not as somebody trying to put them down, right? And that is where we are working with cutting edge research in the field of neuropsychology, neurosciences, emotional intelligence, conversational intelligence, all of that, and trying to see how people can harness their emotions well. Because without harnessing emotions, there's no way you can create employee engagement. You can create or you can sustain the best of the talent in your organization. You may create as many policies as you want, but it is that conversation between the leader and the employee where emotions get played out. And if you're
Yes.
not able to handle those conversations in a savvy manner, well, policies are only as good as precepts. There's no practice.
And many of us, I think, we face these hindrances, these emotion when we are not emotionally that intelligent. We take some very wrong decisions while working, or then like even if promotions are concerned or something. So I think that's
Yeah,
really, really important,
yeah,
this emotional intelligence. And
yeah.
don't you
And
think that education system of the country also needs to get in over
oh,
there
of
to
course, of course, of course,
train the students at the right age?
of course. So, for example, how to take setbacks. You
Hmm.
know, we have willy nilly created an education system of fixed mindsets.
Hmm.
If you're only as good as your marks are. I
Yes,
One of my teachers used to always pun on this word and say we are all Marxist in certain sense,
that's
running after
interesting.
marks all throughout our life. So now the point is, um, if you create that fixed mindset, which means that exam defines you, how are you going? Life is much more than the mark sheet.
Hmm.
I mean, today, Rupinder, in your area or in my area, nobody asks how many marks I scored in my
Yes.
10th class math
Hmm.
or
Yes.
English or social studies.
Hmm.
What matters is what we bring to the table, right? And
Yes.
it is much more than marks. And
Hmm.
honestly, if you ask me, and this has been my experience, and I want to call it out, I
Hmm.
find one of the things that we do a lot, or we have to do a lot, is to do a lot of level setting for students who come from top educational institutions.
Hmm.
They come with a sense of entitlement
Yes.
versus students who come from, or new employees who come from other institutions. While every large organization wants to hire people from marquee institutions, we have seen that people who come from average institutions are also doing well
Yes.
because they have greater growth mindset. They
Hmm.
are much more emotionally resilient
Hmm.
to take feedback, and they don't take umbrage to any developmental conversation that happens. They don't
Hmm.
feel entitled as much. And
Hmm.
what I feel is that our educational system needs to create that emotional depth
Hmm.
on how to handle some of these things, how to handle crisis, how to handle conflict, how to handle teamwork and stuff like that. As much as they, look into the STEM subjects and create capability and excellence in that. And that
Hmm.
is the need for humanities education. I was speaking about this to a group of researchers in VIT, and
Hmm.
I said that's the need for the for the teachers,
Yes.
for the humanities educations to evolve. How do you create that emotional resilience?
Hmm. So nowadays, like we have heard this word teamwork a lot, collaboration. We are using these terminologies at schools and college level also. So we are aware of this thing.
Hmm,
And
hmm,
then comes this emotional intelligence. But you used one word which was really interesting. That was conversational intelligence.
hmm, hmm.
I think this was the word
Yes,
you used.
conversational
And
intelligence.
I think that is the most important thing, because usually when you are on like one side of the table and then the other person is on the other side, there this conversational intelligence, it also plays an important role when it comes to the corporate world or the job scenario or the
Absolutely.
work scenario.
So if you were to typically look at emotional intelligence is in by and large very intrapersonal. How I feel, how I perceive your emotions or your needs, but how I express them is conversational intelligence. What do I want to achieve in a conversation? Is this a conversation where I'm just transacting, so I'm just telling tomorrow is a holiday? Or is this a conversation where I'm trying to persuade you to say, hey, mine is the best organization in the world and you should only come to me? Or is this a conversation where I'm trying to have a transformative dialogue with you, where I'm trying to ask you, hey, what are your business goals for 2023? How do you think your people are, how well do you think your people are prepared for this? What new attitudes, skills, and knowledge would they require? And how can we support you in that? And that is where we kind of suspend judgment. We think that the other side is as intelligent or as good as we are, and then facilitate a space for co creation where, what they tell us is what is going to be the offering that we will make for them. And if you ask me, that is exactly what organizations are doing. They're constantly seeking feedback from their consumers, from their customers, from anybody who uses their product and their services. And they're constantly trying to, reposition, reinvent, reorient themselves, better themselves. And if that has to happen, that also has to happen at the level of conversations that you have, right? I mean, you can't go with the mindset of a complaint box. Remember the olden times, we used to have
Yes.
complaint box. So
Complaint
anytime,
box.
if you don't have a complaint, means what I'm doing is fine. But
Fine.
you might have something which is beyond fine to also take it forward. And that is
Hmm.
where incremental development, transformative development comes into picture.
So, how can a leader sense these, certain types of insecurities emerging within the company? A little bit into that, if you can just.
That's a very, very, very beautiful question you're asking, and probably a very tough question you're asking as
Yeah.
well. The conversation begins with self. Is the leader able to sense the insecurity within himself? Right? Most of the leaders, and this is what research shows, right, um, are in this business of trying to prove I am great. Some of them who reach that pinnacle of I am great, and I am great is predicated by a simple message: you are not great.
Yes.
Right? So I am great.
Absolutely.
Vis-a-vis, you are not great. The second one is when you kind of reach the acme of your, I am great. You understand that there are limitations to what you can achieve yourself. You start talking about we are great. I mean, we as an organization, we are great. But then again, we are great is predicated by a phenomena of othering, right? I mean, others are not great. We are great. I mean, we are better than others. And if you were to typically look at, still there is this competitive space. If you have to really create the collaborative space where people grow and thrive, is when you start talking the language of we all are great, you know, which goes back to our own scriptural things of saying that, the entire world is a family, and,
Yes.
we all need to develop, and in everybody's development lies the development of people, right? I mean, philosophies like Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam or
Yes.
Antodaya, which, which our scriptures have been talking about. Now, if you have to move through these, first of all, you have to be very open to not seeing yourself as a very perfect being. Embrace imperfection. Embrace the fact that we are all a work in progress. It's not just Will Smith who says he's work in progress, but we are all work in progress, right? And um, there is a you know a good person in us, there is a not so good person in us. Both of them provide energy to our thinking. We need to work with these different selves and work with those of the other people as well. Organizations, just like human beings, make mistakes. They have to suffer the consequences, and yet at the same time they also have the ability to bounce back.
Yes.
Leaders make mistakes. They are as human as you and I are. Right? I mean, the ability to accept that mistake, Rupinder, is the
Yes.
beginning to sense in others that, you know what, we made a mistake. Here's what we did. And let us know how we can collectively make it better. So that tap into that collective emotion and intelligence of people. Create a mechanism on an organization where people have the freedom to bubble upwards their ideas, thoughts, and concerns. There is no reprimand. There is no retribution. It may sound a little, you know, uh, fabulous, right? But then that is the kind of organization which is thriving. If you see what Satya Nadella has done to Microsoft, I mean, the entire The recent growth in Microsoft has is attributed to that culture change. And this is also happening in Indian companies. Let me tell you, as Arif, we get an opportunity to not only work with the big fours or in the consulting space or with some of the Fortune 500 or Fortune 100 companies. We also work with smaller IT companies, smaller companies, which many a times cannot really afford cutting edge learning, cutting edge development tools, and we bring it to them at a I would say at a price point or at a manageable way in which they can work. Because see, for example, a company of 300 people at least has 7 to 8 managers,
Yes.
and each one of those 300 people is an individual. They're happy or they're sad, their families depend upon their earning, and those managers or those leaders have the responsibility to make it happen,
Make it happen.
right? So it's not just that an IBM needs to get its managers trained. I mean, even your next door neighbor guy who probably has just opened up a startup needs that, and that is very critical. In fact, they need it much more because they have a paucity of other resources. Right?
That is why I think it is said that people don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad managers.
Yes, that's thanks to
So,
Narayan Murthy sir. Everybody, that has become a home truth, isn't it?
yes, so they require this kind of hand holding which you are
Yeah,
providing. It's
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
absolutely wonderful.
yeah,
So how
absolutely.
is it this mindset changing? This leadership whole scenario is changing. Like
See,
from your
one of
experience of dealing with different companies, what can you say?
so one of the things that which is happening in the learning and development spaces, people have started understanding that sustainable development doesn't happen through events. You just can't have a 3 day summit and get ABC to come and talk, and one Nobel laureate coming and talking, and you go and attend and buy a seat in a big program, and development will happen. Development doesn't happen that way. It's like it's like watching a great movie. While you watch the movie, you feel very patriotic, you feel like you would also like to do something for the nation, but the next day when it comes to throwing your garbage in the right place, you don't do that, right? So that
Yeah.
goes on to say that we think that we can know, but to make it a part of our character, as I said, the being, it takes time. So if you typically look at it, organizations are moving to a lot more personalized fields of learning. So you learn a concept, maybe through a training program. Before you learn, you decide for yourself, why is it important for me to learn? This is a very important aspect of any executive education or any adult education for that matter. Why am I going to learn? What am I going to learn? Why is this? What is it going to give me? So that creates that felt need. Second is, who is this me who is going to learn? So do I know my mindset very well? So there are instruments, conversations which prepare you for that. Then you go through a program where you probably, you're given a list of tools, you do certain activities, you attend some lectures, etc., etc. After that begins the real process of learning, which is you work with, maybe on a one-on-one level, with your peers to see how they are implementing it on the job, and you probably also work with an external coach to see what are the hurdles, what are the mind blocks, the mental maps which are creating what I would call as the immunities to change, right? And then overcome them one by one and create a sustainable process. So, for example, something like as simple as executive presence, when we have been talking about it in various ways, it takes a period of time. It takes a period of 6 to 8 months for an individual to perceive his peer presence, start working with the developmental feedback on it, and show a needle movement which is sustainable. Right? Different levers have to be used. And in this regard, we use the 70-20-10 model. 10% happens in the classroom, and that has been over indexed. People think that 70% happens in the classroom. It doesn't. 10% happens in the classroom. Please don't equate this to school education, where the child goes to the
Mhm.
school every day. Right?
Yes.
The leader does not come to learn every day.
Every day.
Only 10% happens in the classroom. 20% happens by talking to peers, coaches, etc. 70% happens when you actually get into the mud, roll up your sleeves, and start working with the messiness of your learning. And that requires you to be supported by the manager of that organization, by a coach, by different other and metrics to measure the development. So that is where we specialize in terms of creating those experiences in the 70 and the 20, apart from just the 10.
I think from that only this engagement building
Mm,
comes into the
mm.
scene. That when
Yeah,
everybody is feel connected, and
yeah,
it's important to be connected with the organization or with the people you're daily meeting and working with.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely. And I cannot overemphasize the need for connection, the need for connected with a purpose. I mean, imagine you meeting an Indian Army Jawan in the at an airport, and you ask him, "What do you do?" And probably you will get the answer that मैं देश की सेवा करता हूँ, or I protect my country, or I help you sleep better when I'm fighting at the border. He doesn't tell you about his arms, his ammunition, whether he's an infantry guy, whether he's a, he flies a Sukhoi or any of that kind of stuff, right? I mean, he doesn't tell you that. But if you ask anybody who's not that, and ask probably a testing professional from the software field, hey, what do you do? Oh, you know what, I am into testing, I use Selenium and some of these tools. So fine, you are looking at the picture at the matchbox size, or are you looking at the picture at the football field size? So where are you looking at, and what is your connection to your job? Are you doing a job, or are you doing a calling? And that's a very important thing, because while world is moving towards gig economy, where people are not going to do standard jobs. They're going to do what they're expert at for different people. So you know what, I write softwares which helps doctors treat their patients better.
Okay.
That's my expertise. So if I'm not connected to that reality, the reality of the patient and the doctor, my software skills are going to become dated very quickly.
Absolutely.
Hmm? The
That
connection is very
makes
important.
sense. Yes, it's important, right? So, what has been your observation that it's said, or during pandemic we have noticed, or these things came up into the mainstream that majority of people, not only in India but all over the world, they are stressed, and when it comes to joining the office on Monday, like it's a disastrous situation, or like they feel stressed out, burned out. So
Yeah.
what has been your observation into this context when you meet so many people working with different organizations?
See, there is an opportunity for even the biggest and the brightest to make organizations much more of a, if I'm not even using the word happy, right? Because happy or sad depends upon so many things. It's a very subjective term. But what I would call as a psychologically safe place for people to be, where people want to be there, right? So, long before the pandemic, large research institutions like Gallup were asking, do I have a best friend at work? And in their surveys, when employees answered that, yes, I do have a best friend at work, they felt that, or the data showed that those employees were much more loyal, or much more resilient, and much more productive to the organization, versus people who said no or maybe. The other key question that comes to mind is, Do you see your tomorrow in this place? Do you think that the best days of your organization are ahead of it? Now, if these two key questions are answered affirmatively by an employee, the Mondays and the Tuesdays won't matter, Rupinder. I mean, they would still matter. I mean, you can still have a bad Sunday evening and you can have a Monday hangover if you may like. But then, uh, apart from that, the Mondays and the Tuesdays won't matter because the
Yes.
overall culture of the organization allows people to to irrigate their intrinsic drivers. And what are those intrinsic drivers? The need for connection or belongingness, the need for competence or mastery, right? And the need for autonomy. By autonomy, I don't mean absolute autonomy, but then for autonomy to know that, hey, what is it that I want to do? Where do I want to go in next 5 years? And the organization should support me in this journey. Right? People should feel respected, uh, heard, and developed. So if that is happening in an organization, and there are ways of checking it, right? And I must tell you that surveys are not the best ways. There are other ways as well. Um, your organization is a good place to work, and people will not feel because it connects to their passion. It connects to their passion. I mean, that's what is also the holy grail of working with millennials.
And usually, I would say, I don't know, you can give your opinion into that, that
Hmm.
leaders, they become very insecure when they see that these people getting connected with one another, and they try to break those bondings. What would you
I I
say
I
in this
personally
regard?
I personally feel that any effort in doing that is counterproductive because people can only bring the best out of each other, right? And they can also bring the worst out of each other if the
Yeah,
if the
absolutely.
environment is as toxic as that. So workplaces, and if you typically see, they have become much more equitable, much more democratic. um, People are trusting competence more than titles. Titles are becoming insignificant now. Organizations have had started becoming flat. And if you look at the future of work with things like gig economy and others, it is only connect. So for example, in a day, a person might be working for two different organizations. And I mean, it's not just consultants like me. It could be even a software professional. He just
Yes.
tests the codes of organization A in the morning half and B in the evening half. Now he is using his learning, whether you like it or not, from B to A and A to B. So
Absolutely.
some of these so-called, if I may use that term from the world of finance or banking, those Chinese walls need to break down.
Yes.
I mean,
Actually.
psychologically, they're not present. You know what I mean? I mean, so um, you can't
Yes.
stop me from using learning from A to B, can you? I mean, right?
Absolutely. So, I was reading somewhere this thing that I have written it. I would like to read that out in front of you. That one secret of leadership development is like providing time for others to engage in self-reflection.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
think it is actually the same point which we had discussed in the beginning,
yeah,
that
yeah.
they need to give that time to the other person, the team, to
And to
reflect,
themselves.
and to
And to
themselves.
themselves. See, what happens is in the razzmatazz and humdrum of everyday work, we talk about empathy. We want leaders to be empathetic towards others. But how can they be if they are so harsh to themselves? If they are so harsh to themselves, it's very important for them or for leaders and for each one of us to accept ourselves as we are, accept our imperfections. I mean, it doesn't mean that you celebrate that and you remain imperfect, or you remain, you know, you remain compromised, if I may use that. You keep on striving, but you also know that, it is every day you will have a new challenge. You're chasing a moving target. You're not chasing a static target. So that
And is
is.
it also, I'm sorry, I'm just
Yeah,
interrupting you in
sure,
between.
sure, sure.
Like, is it that sense of, or you just want to be a perfectionist? You want perfection all the
Yes,
time?
yes, yes. That is the entire Western project, isn't it? I think,
Hmm.
therefore I am, and that
Hmm.
I is very great. I am great.
Hmm.
Now, the moment you are able to overcome that necessity for personal greatness and look into the collective wisdom of the team and the group and see, hey, you know what? I need other people to complement me to
Hmm.
retain this greatness. So we are great. And I need still more people beyond my organization
Yes.
to come and make the entire world a better place to be, is when we say we all are great, right? Now, to do that, to do that, you will have to be able to, or I will have to be able to, reflect on who I am. And one way of doing that is a very simple way of journaling, the age old method of something like what we used to be taught in our childhood as diary writing,
Diary writing.
right? What did I do? What are the three situations that I faced today? What were my responses? What else I could have done, right? Or, and you if you track this data for a month or so, 6 months down the line, you would see certain patterns emerging, certain emotional triggers that are there, which seem to crop up every time you meet with a situation like this. And therefore, see what mitigating strategies or coping mechanisms you can develop to work with it. And don't go with what we call as, blind spots or automatic stories into a situation, mental models, as
Yes.
the NLP guys would call it.
Yeah. Yes. So, like, if somebody wants to, get connected with you or your organization, I really want you to just share some of the links that how can they connect with you.
Yeah, I think, they can very well write to us, info at arif.co.in, co.in. They can go to our website, arif.co.in, and we are just a phone call away. We are a boutique firm, we are a small firm. We don't work with many clients at any given point in time, but we do deep work with each client that we work with. And we believe in transformative work. We don't believe in a one day team building exercise and move out types. I mean, honestly, there's nothing wrong with that, but that's not who we are in the market. And
Yes.
that's why we are very careful when we onboard a client, when we work with a client. We try to understand them, we try to empathize with them, we spend significant amount of time trying to, um, you know feeling what they are feeling, understanding what their business models are, then co-create with them strategies as to what needs to be done more or done differently, create sustainable development paths where we participate and their own internal resources participate, and give them sustenance mechanisms, because Rome was not built in a day, right? So you can't bring in behavior change overnight, can you?
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
So before we move towards the end of today's conversation, I really want you to like share some success story with us, any like client partnership where you really felt that sense of satisfaction or something, any small incident or something
See, we
which comes to your mind.
one of the things is that, I'll be very honest with you. There are many such stories. I personally wouldn't like to over-index one client over the other and do that, and we are also bound by lots of non-disclosure agreements,
Yes,
etc.
I understand that.
But let me tell you, we have worked with this particular IT firm and their senior managers, or delivery heads, as you would call them, and they were going through significant amount of the regular teething troubles. On one side was client acquisition, the other side was maintaining the morale of their people, the third was helping their people to develop, adapt to new technologies. So we got into a long term work with them for almost 2 years. We have worked at various levels in that organization. We kind of worked right from CXO minus 1 down to the first time managers. And what we have seen is that they have been able to show great development. They have been able to show their own scores on third party surveys not conducted by us, so that there was no conflict of interest, have bettered. People, the attrition numbers have come down, which is very significant thing, because in this last 6 to 8 months they have also had their own share of the great resignation, but then they have been able to retain their top talent, and they themselves feel that that they are better off than who they used to be. um, and honestly speaking, Rupinder, the work that we do, we are not very good at. We are not the best marketing guys. So we don't get a lot of work through advertisements, and we don't have the heft and the might to spend those um, dollars on marketing campaigns. We get our work from referrals, who feel that we have the intensity and the passion to make a difference, and we get work from that. So we do try to bring in, cutting edge work to people. At the same time, it is, so there are many such. So in the
Yeah.
infrastructure space, in the pharma space, the banking and financial space, we have stories where we have done great work. But I'm refraining from naming a particular client
Yeah.
versus the other,
No, that's
because I
absolutely
hope you
fine.
understand, because um, um, that in many ways will say, hey, wasn't my work as good as it,
Yes.
right? So I don't want that
And
to.
I can bet on it after this conversation with you that there would be, of course, many of the success stories because you are a man with that insight and
Right,
vision which you
right.
have got,
Thank you.
that you're very clear with that. And absolutely, like whatever you have spoken, that absolutely makes sense. So I can
Thank you.
really bet on that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So
Uh,
thank you so much for joining me today. It was a
Thank you.
wonderful conversation and learned a lot from you.
Pleasure
And many
here.
of the doubts which I had in my mind, like they got cleared after
Right.
today's conversation.
And let me tell you, you will have newer doubts. So feel free to come back, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And thank you very much for having me on your show. As I said, it's a rare pleasure. Thank you and your team at Work TV for doing such a stellar job for entrepreneurs like us.
Thank you. Wonderful. We always look forward to having great conversations with entrepreneurs like you. Thank you so much for joining me today. So, ladies and gentlemen, this was Mr. Ravi Chatterjee from Arif, leadership coach and facilitator. I hope you learned a lot from today's conversation as I did. So, we'll be meeting next time with yet another trendsetter. So, just keep on waiting. Thank you so much for your time, sir. Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.